Spires again opened his mouth. "I should be sorry to hurt your feelings, Mrs. Degg," he said, "but I have my fears that you are coming to this place with false expectations. I fear your husband did not give you the truest possible account of his family here." "Oh, sir, what is it?" exclaimed the poor woman. "In God's name tell me." "Why, nothing more than this," said the manufacturer, "that there are very few of the Deggs left here. They are old and on the parish and can do nothing for you." The poor woman gave a deep sigh and was silent. "But don't be cast down," said Mr. Spires. He would not tell her what a pauper family it really was, for he saw that she was a very feeling woman, and he thought she would learn that soon enough. He felt that her husband had from vanity given her a false account of his connections, and he was really sorry for her. "Don't be cast down," he went on. "You can wash and iron, you say? You are young and strong, those are your friends. Depend on them and they'll be better friends to you than any other." The poor woman was silent, leaning her head down on her slumbering child and crying to herself. And thus they drove on, through many long and narrow streets, with gas flaring from the shops but with few people in the streets, and these hurrying shivering along the pavement, so intense was the cold. Anon they stopped at a large pair of gates. The manufacturer rung a bell, which he could reach from his gig, and the gates presently were flung open, and they drove into a spacious yard with a large handsome house, having a bright lamp burning before it on one side of the yard and tall warehouses on the other. "Show this poor woman and her child to Mrs. Craddock's, James," said Mr. Spires, "and tell Mrs. Craddock to make them very comfortable. And if you will come to my warehouse tomorrow," added he, addressing the poor woman, "perhaps I can be of some use to you." The poor woman poured out her heartfelt thanks, and following the old man's servant, soon disappeared, hobbling over the pebbly pavement with her living load, stiffened almost to stone by her fatigue and her cold ride. We must not pursue too minutely our narrative. Mrs. Degg was engaged to do the washing and getting up of Mr. Spire's linen, and the manner in which she executed her task ensured her recommendations to all their friends. Mrs. Degg was at once in full employ. She occupied a neat house in a yard near the meadows below the town, and in those meadows she might be seen spreading out her clothes to whiten on the grass, attended by her stout little boy. In the same yard lived a shoemaker, who had 2 or 3 children of about the same age as Mrs. Degg's child. The children, as time went on, became playfellows. Little Simon might be said to have the free run of the shoemaker's house, and he was the more attracted thither by the shoemaker's birds, and by his flute, on which he often played after his work was done. Mrs. Degg took a great friendship for the shoemaker, and he and his wife, a quiet, kind-hearted woman, were almost all the acquaintances that she cultivated. She had found out her husband's parents, but they were not of a description that at all pleased her. They were old and infirm, but they were of the true pauper breed, a sort of person, whom Mrs. Degg had been taught to avoid and to despise. They looked on her as a sort of second parish, and insisted that she should come and live with them, and help to maintain them out of her earnings. But Mrs. Degg would rather her little boy had died than have been familiarized with the spirit and habits of those old people. Despise them, she struggled hard not to do, and she agreed to allow them sufficient to maintain them on condition that they desisted from any further application to the parish. It would be a long and disgusting story to recount all the troubles, annoyance, and querulous complaints, and even bitter accusations that she received from these connections, whom she could never satisfy. But she considered it one of her crosses in her life, and patiently bore it, seeing that they suffered no real want, so long as they lived, which was for years, but she would never allow her little Simon to be with them alone. The shoemaker neighbor was a stout protection to her against the greedy demands of these old people, and of others of the old Deggs, and also against another class of inconvenient visitors, namely, suitors, who saw in Mrs. Degg a neat and comely young woman with a flourishing business, and a neat and soon well-furnished house, a very desirable acquisition. But Mrs. Degg had resolved never again to marry, but to live for her boy, and she kept her resolve in firmness and gentleness. The shoemaker often took walks in the extensive town meadows to gather groundsel and plantain for his canaries and gorslinnets, and little Simon Degg delighted to accompany him with his own children. There William Watson, the shoemaker, used to point out to the children the beauty of the flowers, the insects, and other objects of nature. And while he sate on a stile and read in a little old book of poetry, as he often used to do, the children sate on the summer grass and enjoyed themselves in a variety of plays. The effect of these walks, and the shoemaker's conversation on little Simon Degg was such as never wore out of him through his whole life, and soon led him to astonish the shoemaker by his extraordinary conduct. He manifested the utmost uneasiness at their treading on the flowers in the grass. He would burst with tears if they persisted in it, and when asked why, he said they were so beautiful, and that they must enjoy the sunshine and be very unhappy to die. The shoemaker was amazed, but indulged the lad's fancy. One day he thought to give him a great treat, and when they were out in the meadows, he drew from under his coat a bow and arrow and shot the arrow high up in the air. He expected to see him in an ecstasy of delight. His own children clapped their hands in transport, but Simon stood silent and as if awestruck. "Shall I send up another?" asked the shoemaker. "No, no," exclaimed the child imploringly. "You say God lives up there and he mayn't like it." The shoemaker laughed, but presently he said, as if to himself, "There is too much imagination there. There will be a poet if we don't take care." The shoemaker offered to teach Simon to read, and to solidify his mind, as he termed it, by arithmetic, and then to teach him to work at his trade. His mother was very glad, and thought shoemaking would be a good trade for the boy, and that with Mr. Watson she should have him always near her. He was growing now a great lad, and was especially strong, and of a frank and daring habit. He was especially indignant at any act of oppression of the weak by the strong, and not seldom got into trouble by his championship of the injured in such cases amongst the boys of the neighborhood. He was now about 12 years of age, when, going one day with a basket of clothes on his head to Mr. Spires's for his mother, he was noticed by Mr. Spires himself from his counting-house window. The Great War was raging, there was much distress amongst the manufacturers, and the people were suffering and exasperated against their masters. Mr. Spires, as a staunch Tory and supporter of the war, was particularly obnoxious to the workpeople, who uttered violent threats against him. For this reason his premises were strictly guarded, and at the entrance of his yard, just within the gates, was chained a huge and fierce mastiff, his chain allowing him to approach near enough to intimidate any stranger, though not to reach him. The dog knew the people who came regularly about and seemed not to notice them, but on the entrance of a stranger, he rose up, barked fiercely, and came to the length of his chain. This always drew the attention of the porter, if he were away from his box, and few persons dared to pass till he came. Simon Degg was advancing with the basket of clean linen on his head, when the dog rushed out, and barking loudly, came exactly opposite to him, within a few feet. The boy, a good deal startled at first, reared himself with his back against the wall, but at a glance perceiving that the dog was at the length of his tether, he seemed to enjoy his situation, and stood smiling at the furious animal, and lifting his basket with both hands above his head, nodded to him as if to say, "Well, old boy, you'd like to eat me, wouldn't you?" Mr. Spires, who sate near his counting-house window at his books, was struck with the bold and handsome bearing of the boy, and said to a clerk, "What boy is that?" "It is Jenny Deggs," was the answer. "Ha, that boy, zounds, how boys do grow. What, that's the child that Jenny Degg was carrying when she came to Stockington, and what a strong, handsome, bright-looking fellow he is now." As the boy was returning, Mr. Spires called him to the counting-house door, and put some questions to him as to what he was doing and learning, and so on. Simon, taking off his cap with much respect, answered in such a clear and modest way, and with a voice that had so much feeling and natural music in it, that the worthy manufacturer was greatly taken with him. "That's no Degg," said he, when he again entered the counting-house, "not a bit of it. He's all Goodrick, or whatever his mother's name was, every inch of him." The consequences of that interview was, that Simon Degg was very soon after perched on a stool in Mr. Spires' counting-house, where he continued till he was 22. Mr. Spires had no son, only a single daughter, and such were Simon Degg's talents, attention to business, and genial disposition, that at that age Mr. Spires gave him a share in the concern. He was himself now getting less fond of exertion than he had been, and placed the most implicit reliance on Simon's judgment and general management. Yet no two men could be more unlike in their opinions beyond the circle of trade. Mr. Spires was a staunch Tory of the staunch old school. He was for church and king, and for things remaining forever as they had been. Simon, on the other hand, had liberal and reforming notions. He was for the improvement of the people, and their admission to many privileges. Mr. Spires was, therefore, liked by the leading men of the place and disliked by the people. Simon's estimation was precisely in the opposite direction, but this did not disturb their friendship. It required another disturbing cause, and that came. Simon Degg and the daughter of Mr. Spires grew attached to each other, And, as the father had thought Simon worthy of becoming a partner in the business, neither of the young people deemed that he would object to a partnership of a more domestic description. But here they made a tremendous mistake. No sooner was such a proposal hinted at than Mr. Spires burst forth with the fury of all the winds from the bag of Ulysses. What? A deg aspire to the hand of the sole heiress of the enormously opulent Spires. The very thought almost cut the proud manufacturer off with an apoplexy. The ghosts of 1,000 paupers rose up before him, and he was black in the face. It was only by a prompt and bold application of leeches and lancet that the life of the great man was saved. But there was an end of all further friendship between himself and the expectant Simon. He insisted that he should withdraw from the concern, and it was done. Simon, who felt his own dignity deeply wounded too, for dignity he had, though the last of a long line of paupers, his own dignity, not his ancestors', took silently yet not unrespectfully his share, a good, round sum, and entered another house of business. For several years there appeared to be a feud and a bitterness between the former friends, yet it showed itself in no other manner than by a careful avoidance of each other. The Continental War came to an end, the manufacturing distress increased exceedingly. There came troublous times and a fierce warfare of politics. Great Stockington was torn asunder by rival parties. On one side stood preeminent Mr. Spires, on the other towered conspicuously Simon Degg. Simon was grown rich and extremely popular. He was on all occasions the advocate of the people. He said that he had sprung from and was one of them. He had bought a large tract of land on one side of the town, and intensely fond of the country and flowers himself, he had divided this into gardens, built little summer houses in them, and let them to the artisans. In his factory he had introduced order, cleanliness, and ventilation. He had set up a school for the children in the evenings, with a reading room and conversation room for the workpeople, and encouraged them to bring their families there and enjoy music, books, and lectures. Accordingly, he was the idol of the people, and the horror of the old school of the manufacturers. "A pretty upstart and demagogue I've nurtured," said Mr. Spires often to his wife and daughter, who only sighed and were silent. Then came a furious election. The town, for a fortnight, more resembled the worst corner of Tartarus than a Christian borough. Drunkenness, riot, pumping on one another, spencering one another, all sorts of violence and abuse ruled and raged till the blood of all Stockington was at boiling heat. In the midst of the tempest were everywhere seen, ranged on the opposite sides, Mr. Spires, now old and immensely corpulent, and Simon Degg, active, buoyant, zealous, and popular beyond measure. But popular though he still was, the other and old Tory side triumphed. The people were exasperated to madness, and when the chairing of the successful candidate commenced, there was a terrific attack made on the procession by the defeated party. Down went the chair, and the new member, glad to escape into an inn, saw his friends mercilessly assailed by the populace. There was a tremendous tempest of sticks, brickbats, paving stones, and rotten eggs. In the midst of this, Simon Degg and a number of his friends, standing at the upper window of a hotel, saw Mr. Spires knocked down and trampled on by the crowd. In an instant, and before his friends had missed him from among them, Simon Degg was then darting through the raging mass, cleaving his way with a surprising vigor, and gesticulating, and no doubt shouting vehemently to the rioters, though his voice was lost in the din. In the next moment his hat was knocked off, and himself appeared in imminent danger. But another moment, and there was a pause, and a group of people were bearing somebody from the frantic mob into a neighboring shop. It was Simon Degg, assisting in the rescue of his old friend and benefactor, Mr. Spires. Mr. Spires was a good deal bruised, and wonderfully confounded and bewildered by his fall. His clothes were one mass of mud, and his face was bleeding copiously. But when he had had a good draught of water, and his face washed, and had time to recover himself, it was found that he had received no serious injury. "They had like to have done for me, though," said he. "Yes, and who saved you?" asked a gentleman. "Aye, who was it, who was it?" asked the really warm-hearted manufacturer. "Let me know, I owe him my life." "There he is," said several gentlemen, at the same instant pushing forward Simon Degg. "What, Simon?" said Mr. Spires, starting to his feet. "Was it thee, my boy?" He did more, he stretched out his hand. The young man clasped it eagerly, and the two stood silent, and with a heartfelt emotion, which blended all the past into forgetfulness, and the future into a union more sacred than esteem. A week hence, and Simon Degg was the son-in-law of Mr. Spires, though Mr. Spires had misunderstood Simon. and Simon had borne the aspect of opposition to his old friend in defense of conscientious principle. The wife and daughter of the manufacturer had always understood him, and secretly looked forward to some day of recognition and reunion. Simon Degg was now the richest man in Stockington. His mother was still living to enjoy his elevation. She had been his excellent and wise housekeeper, and she continued to occupy that post still. 25 years afterwards, when the worthy old Spires was dead, and Simon Degg had himself two sons attained to manhood, when he had 5 times been mayor of Stockington, and had been knighted on the presentation of a loyal address. Still his mother was living to see it, and William Watson, the shoemaker, was acting as the sort of orderly at Sir Simon's chief manufactory. He occupied the lodge and walked about, and saw that all was safe and moving on as it should do. It was amazing how the most plebeian name of Simon Pegg had slid, under the hands of the heralds, into the really aristocratical one of Sir Simon de Gea. They had traced him up a collateral kinship, spite of his own consciousness, to a baronet of the same name of the county of Stafford, and had given him a coat of arms that was really astonishing. It was some years before this that Sir Roger Rockville breathed his last. His title and estate had fallen into litigation, owing to 2 generations having passed without any issue of the Rockville family, except the one son and heir. The claims, though numerous, were so mingled with obscuring circumstances, and so equally balanced, that the lawyers raised quibbles and difficulties enough to keep the property in chancery, till they had not only consumed all the ready money and rental, but had made frightful inroads into the estate itself. To save the remnant, the contending parties came to a compromise. A neighboring squire, whose grandfather had married a Rockville, was allowed to secure the title, on condition that the rest carried off the residuum of the estate. The woods and lands of Rockville were announced for sale. It was at this juncture that old William Watson reminded Sir Simon de Gea of a conversation in the great grove of Rockville, which they had held at the time that Sir Roger was endeavoring to drive the people thence. "What a divine pleasure might this man enjoy," said Simon Degg to his humble friend, "if he had a heart capable of letting others enjoy themselves." "But we talk without the estate," said William Watson. "What might we do if we were tried with it?" Sir Simon was silent for a moment, then observed that there was sound philosophy in William Watson's remark. He said no more, but went away, and the next day announced to the astonished old man that he had purchased the groves and the whole ancient estate of Rockville. Sir Simon de Gea, the last of a long line of paupers, was become the possessor of the noble estate of Sir Roger Rockville of Rockville, the last of a long line of aristocrats. The following summer, when the hay was lying in fragrant cocks in the great meadows of Rockville, and on the little islands in the river, Sir Simon de Gea, Baronet of Rockville, for such was now his title, through the suggestion of a great lawyer, formerly recorder of the borough of Stockington to the Crown, held a grand fête on the occasion of his coming to reside at Rockville Hall, henceforth the family seat of the de Geas. His house and gardens had been restored to the most consummate order. For years Sir Simon had been a great purchaser of works of art and literature, paintings, statuary, books, and articles of antiquity, including rich armor and precious works in ivory and gold. First and foremost, he gave a great banquet to his wealthy friends, and no man with 1.5 million is without them, and in abundance. In the second place, he gave a substantial dinner to all his tenantry, from the wealthy farmer of 500 acres to the tenant of a cottage. On this occasion he said, "Game is a great subject of heart-burning, and of great injustice to the country. It was the bane of my predecessor. Let us take care it is not ours. Let every man kill the game on the land that he rents. Then he will not destroy it utterly, nor allow it to grow into a nuisance. I am fond of a gun myself, but I trust to find enough for my propensity to the chase in my own fields and woods. If I occasionally extend my pursuit across the lands of my tenants, it shall not be to carry off the first fruits of their feeding, and I shall still hold the enjoyment as a favor." We need not say that this speech was applauded most vociferously. Thirdly, and lastly, he gave a grand entertainment to all his work people, both of the town and the country. His house and gardens were thrown open to the inspection of the whole assembled company. The delighted crowd admired immensely the pictures and the pleasant gardens. On the lawn, lying between the great grove and the hall, an enormous tent was pitched, or rather a vast canvas canopy erected, open on all sides, in which was laid a charming banquet, a military band from Stockington Barracks playing during the time. Here Sir Simon made a speech as rapturously received as that to the farmers. It was to the effect that all the old privileges of wandering in the grove, and angling and boating on the river were restored. The inn was already rebuilt in a handsome Elizabethan style, larger than before, and to prevent it ever becoming a fane of intemperance, he had there posted as landlord, he hoped for many years to come, his old friend and benefactor, William Watson. William Watson should protect the inn from riot, and they themselves the groves and river banks from injury. Long and loud were the applauses which this announcement occasioned. The young people turned out upon the green for a dance, and in the evening, after an excellent tea, the whole company descended the river to Stockington in boats and barges decorated with boughs and flowers, and singing a song made by William Watson for the occasion, called The Health of Sir Simon, last and first of his line. Years have rolled on. The groves and river banks and islands of Rockville are still greatly frequented, but are never known to be injured. Poachers are never known there for 4 reasons. First, nobody would like to annoy the good Sir Simon. Secondly, game is not very numerous there. Thirdly, there is no fun in killing it where there is no resistance. And fourthly, it is vastly more abundant in other proprietors' domains, and it is fun to kill it there, where it is jealously watched, and there is a chance of a good spree with the keepers. And with what different feelings does the good Sir Simon look down from his lofty eyrie, over the princely expanse of meadows, and over the glittering river, and over the stately woods to where great Stockington still stretches farther and farther its red brick walls, its red-tiled roofs, and its tall smoke-vomiting chimneys. There he sees no haunts of crowded enemies to himself or any man, no upstarts nor envious opponents, but a vast family of human beings, all toiling for the good of their families and their country. All advancing, some faster, some slower, to a better education, a better social condition, a better conception of the principles of art and commerce, and a clearer recognition of their rights and their duties, and a more cheering faith in the upward tendency of humanity. Looking on this interesting scene from his distant and quiet home, Sir Simon sees what blessings flow, and how deeply he feels them in his own case. From a free circulation, not only of trade, but of human relations, how this corrects the mischiefs, moral and physical, of false systems and rusty prejudices. And he ponders on schemes of no ordinary beauty and beneficence, yet to reach his beloved town through them. He sees lecture halls and academies, means of sanitary purification and delicious recreation, in which baths, wash-houses, and airy homes figure largely, while public walks extend all round the great industrial hive, including wood, hills, meadow, and river in their circuit of many miles. There he lived and labored. There live and labor his sons, and there he trusts his family will continue to live and labor to all future generations, never retiring to the fatal indolence of wealth, but aiding onwards its active and ever-expanding beneficence. Long may the good Sir Simon live and labor to realize these views. But already in a green corner of the pleasant churchyard of Rockville may be read this inscription on a marble headstone: "Sacred to the memory of Jane Degg, the mother of Sir Simon de Bart, of Rockville." This stone is erected in honor of the best of mothers by the most grateful of sons.